Hello, Automating Success followers. So, as many of you know, I have had Logan Fahey on the show before, and I like the fact that the show has existed long enough to be able to bring uh, someone like Logan back because, as anyone knows, our industry is constantly and rapidly evolving. So, I'm going to introduce Logan, kind of his background for anybody that hasn't listened to a previous podcast or don't know who Logan is. And then from there, me and Logan are going to get into uh, the industry and the space. Logan, sound good to you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
All right. So Logan is a serial entrepreneur, much like myself. He was the founder of Fahey Group, and he has 6 active companies under management, and he's had 2 successful exits. Um, he is now the CEO of Graze. It's a commercial lawnmower, and it was kind of running before. Now Logan has come in as CEO to move it forward. So congratulations on that, Logan.
Thank you.
Logan is also the former CEO of Robin Autopilot, which was a robotic lawn care company that was a franchise, got into SaaS, or not got into SaaS, it's refocused on that. So I'm sure Logan and I will address that a little bit. But back to Graze, it's an automatic electric mower designed to serve large scale properties such as airports, parks, government facilities, including properties with high security requirements. Graze is now going to be opening an office in the Dallas area with its R&D operations. That'll be continued to be located in the Los Angeles headquarters. Over the next year, Graze plans to focus on running key pilot programs to enterprise level customers through Texas and Florida. Um, let's see here. I'm kind of skimming through. There's a lot there, so I could kind of bore us all, but there's a lot there. So just so people understand, he's the founder and managing partner of Fahey Group, which is a holding company that he owns and operates a series of companies, including Robin Autopilot, Coral View Technologies, Landmark Lawn and Garden, Landmark Automation, Fahey Advisors, and Onus Bank, Onus Bakery. That sorry, I
That's a
think I
fun
typoed
one.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, uh, he founded Fahey Group in 2017. He'll continue as chairman of the board at Robin Autopilot, which is a synergistic partner of Graze at the moment. Um, Logan has also led the management team of Landmark Lawn and Garden Supply, based in Northeast Ohio. And he spent his early career in social enterprise working for nonprofits. He's also been involved in numerous associations, including Social Enterprise Alliance, um, Tampa SEA, Change, Social Enterprise Accelerator, Social Enterprise World Forum. And for 2 years, Logan was the board member and treasurer for the LGBT Community Center for Greater Cleveland. So, and people can realize there's a lot there that surrounds Logan besides just being CEO of Graze. And I wanted to take the opportunity to let people know. Many of us in this space are more than just automation geeks. We have a lot going on in our life. We're leaders. And Logan, thanks for being such a great leader, first and foremost.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Okay, so welcome to the show. And Logan, did I leave anything out that that you think you could say better than I just did?
No, you did a great job. Makes me sound better than I am. So I appreciate that.
Well, it's always better coming from somebody else than than
Yeah,
from
yeah.
yourself. Right? Since I've had you on the show before, I think the last time we did it, I didn't take such an opportunity to introduce you. I let you introduce yourself, so I wanted to pay the respect to do it myself. So Logan, let's talk about the I don't want to say the new direction, but the exciting new uh, kind of why in the road that you have with Grace. Let's talk about it a little and tell me what you saw to make you want to do that.
Yeah. So as you know, I spent 5 years building Robin Autopilot, which is very much in a similar space as Graze, and in some ways very different. Robin was focused on building the software and deploying robots mostly with landscapers, smaller municipalities. Graze is focused on large-scale commercial properties, particularly airports and solar fields, and some government work. And as I exited the operational side of Robin, there is this, fork in the road as to whether I go and I wanted to stay in the service industry. So it was either go and work to consolidate up landscaping companies and service-based businesses, or continue down the path and really be in the tech space and specifically robotics. And I still, I said, I still have one more startup in me. And Buck Jordan, the founder of Graze, had been talking with me for a while about coming over and helping their go-to-market strategy. And so I came over about a year ago. We've really been focused on getting the product to scale manufacturing, really delivering in those two parallels in airports and solar. And so it's a fascinating business and great team, founded in 2017, raised great capital. So proud to be part of this new team.
Awesome. So, coming from the space in the brands that you and I are both very familiar with, what do you see is the kind of the opportunity or the differentiator you have with Graze versus what you had with some of the other manufacturers?
Yeah, I mean, the market is kind of split in a couple different ways. As you know, you've got residential, you've got commercial, and then you've got kind of this big differentiator of drop, mow, and go units versus units that stay on the property, live on the property. And then you've got these niche environments. And I would say the majority of traditional OEMs are focusing on delivery to landscapers or to homeowners. And a lot of our kind of early stage competitors are also focusing on those markets. Gray is a little different in that we are fully focused again on the solar and airports. And one of the ways that we're differentiated, if you think about solar field, is a low profile unit. So most of the units you see on the market are fairly high, kind of similar to a stand-on mower. And a lot of them have the capability to stand on it and run it manually and robotically, which is a great trait for landscapers. But when we look at solar fields, and there's 3 million acres of mowable grass in solar in the US, and this is doubling year over year, there's a major problem. These sites are very remote. So we focused on the design to be, one, low profile, two, the ability to mow at night when all of the panels are flat. So we just mow underneath them. And then we've built some unique technologies to be able to inspect solar panels as part of our process. So we have vision on board that can go through while it's mowing and inspect panels for damage to it, whether that be hail damage or human damage to it. Can also inspect the perimeter fence at these sites. And lastly, an ability for a large scale mower to self-charge. So most of the self-charging you're seeing in the market is in the smaller scale, more consumer grade units. We've partnered to create a self-charging dock for the large-scale mowers, which allows this unit to live on site.
Yeah, so that's a big development because I know before you were running Graze, I had looked into that technology and, at the time, and you can maybe tell me what's changed, it was only 6 hour run time and they needed to get charged on their own. And I never really understood. One of the reasons I didn't actually move forward at the time was commercial landscapers work 8 to 12 hour
Right.
shifts. So I don't really understand what was going to happen after six. So maybe why don't you talk a little bit about what's changing and some changes from when a few years ago was looking at them.
Yeah. So obviously, most of the changes from the time I came on were what are the markets and where do we focus time and energy and money where we really can take this base unit and make it successful in these environments. And the challenge with landscaping is the use cases are so different. You're moving from property to property. And so we focused on these kind of specific style sites. In addition to that, we increased the battery capacity to 8 hours. That's a 40 kilowatt battery. We've introduced the self-charging so that it can be docked and then go back out. So we can do a shift, say, during the day, mowing the aisles, and then we can do a shift in the evening, mowing underneath all of the panels, and it'll charge in between those two shifts. We've also we've overhauled the system from a ruggedization and ability to cut really rough terrain. So if you think about some others in the market, I think of Spider, who's a great machine, great for inclines, great for really tough turf. We play in that tough turf. Nothing we mow is really manicured well. You get a lot of rough terrain, a lot of rocks. You could have a lot of water. And so we've made a lot of upgrades to the machine in order to deal with the type of climate we're in, which also means making some sacrifices, right? Our machine wouldn't be a good fit today to go and mow a golf course. We'd have to take a bunch of stuff off that we've added to deal with these tough terrain in order to do more of a manicured lawn. And lastly, I'd say our team and our new chief product officer, Phil Duffy, who came from Brain Corp and has been doing this for over 20 years, has done a tremendous job on simplifying the tech to the application we're in. And so, we know exactly the mapping we need for solar. We know exactly what the airports are looking for, how to connect to command and control. But all of these kind of frills that, I hate to say it, engineers love to over-engineer things. We've backed a lot of that off and said, what's going to make this unit run in these use cases over the next 3 years? And then we'll incrementally add features as they're needed.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, for the listeners, Logan and I, we understand the solar stuff, but they're very rough terrains, as Logan said. They put these things up. There's no final grade. There's no landscapers coming in planting nice turf. A lot of times these things are getting turned over and there's more weeds than grass. And they have these specs where they basically say, just keep the grass under 8 inches. And because of that, that hides a lot of the imperfections. So just so people understand, Logan and his team are going into some pretty harsh environments with their machine. So I think that's actually pretty smart, Logan, that you did that, because right now there's really not a lot of robotics manufacturers in the space that can do that type of work. And it's hard to deal with because not only the terrain, but there's a lot of interference with some of the older technology. I know for myself, I try to do some solar fields with the wired, and then you got interference because it's the what is it? It's a high voltage DC. So so kudos to you guys for doing that. So how so now you're able to leave it on site. How many amps does it take to charge them now that you're charging them on site with that bigger battery?
Yeah. So if you're looking to do a faster charge, a 220 connection is what we suggest. With the new battery packs that we've created in partnership with BYD, they actually can charge off of a standard electric car charger. So you're within 2 to 3 hours. On a 220, you're in that 5 to 6 hour range. And then if you want to do it off of a 110, you're like 13 hours. So we provide all the flexibility, but really what we're looking for is at most sites, we're installing a charge point electric car charger. And that's going to get us to the highest capacity in the shortest amount of time.
Now, does somebody have to plug that in, or is it doing it inductively? Like how are you guys accomplishing that?
Yeah, so there's two systems. One, it can be plugged in manually. The automated charging is a magnetic charging pad, so similar to what electric cars are starting to use, where we pull over the charging pad and it automatically charges the unit. Those are in the general market. I will say that type of charging system, it's super convenient, but it does waste some level of power. The benefit of solar is that we have unlimited amounts of power to deal with on site, and so it is the most efficient for that use case. In others, we're looking at power directly run to it, and it has a docking system on the front. But there are different options. We really do like, and these will get more efficient over time. But the magnetic docking stations are quite impressive.
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of what I assumed. So if you kind of undressing the differences, I'm just trying to bring it out for the people listening that are used to hearing about Echo and Husqvarna and all
Sure.
the brands that are already out. So do you think these have more or less maintenance, or is it equal, just different environment? Because I'm assuming you're using like a fixed blade system. So how does that work compared to what people are used to?
Yeah, so I say the maintenance on this is very similar to the maintenance on an electric zero turn. So the same things you're going to see go wrong on an electric zero turn, you're going to see go wrong on a Graze unit, and that is, typical cleaning of blades. If the unit's in bad conditions, drive motors. If you're pushing the blade motors into really rough terrain, you could burn those out. Wheels. Pretty standard maintenance. The vendors you compared to, I would argue, a Husqvarna Automower or an Echo unit or crest are much less maintenance than these large scale commercial mowers. So if you think about our industry, Scythe and the Green Z enabled mowers, we all kind of have similar, maintenance requirements for the units. Most of the technical maintenance can now be done remote. And one of the unique features that we've developed is the ability to teleoperate the unit. So we can log into the fleet management system, see what the mower sees. We can restart it. We can navigate it, which allows the remote team to fix most things that would be technically based. And then you have the hardware related items that most of it is just consistent maintenance. And obviously, this, and I'm sure your listeners know, you take a lot of maintenance out when you take the gas engines out. So I will say there's a couple automated gas-powered mowers, and they're slowly, I think, moving away. But obviously, that's a huge piece that is part of these electric systems you're not dealing with.
Yeah. So you said that, or my research said that, you guys are still working. Robin is now a partner of Graze. So, how have you been able to leverage back the customers the base you already had at Robin Autopilot and kind of reintroduce them to the Graze technology? And then with that being said, are you still offering the other technology, or are you kind of moving that platform all over to the same platform with, airports and solar fields?
Yeah, great question. So the synergy between Robin and Graze is really on a few customers who were a fit for the Graze product. I would say a good portion of the Robin customers are not looking to deploy in solar or airports. Robin ran a multi-manufacturer program for DFW Airport, for instance. And so Robin was there to do the pilots, to run all the different types of units, to sync it all through the unified fleet management system, and then ultimately make the recommendations to DFW on where, what performed well, where were the issues, what did it look like on the runway, and then DFW can procure the units. And so that was one area where Graze was one of the vendors who participated in that with Robin. Ultimately, Husqvarna and Graze moved forward in procurement for the airport and for different use cases, right? There were some areas that were around offices and big fields that they wanted perfectly striped that made sense for Husqvarna, and then a lot of the rougher terrain runway work made sense for Graze. In addition, the fleet management system that Robin built, which is multi-manufacturer, makes sense. So Graze participates in that by opening up an API to Robin, just like Husqvarna and Nexmo and others have done, so that if a customer, a landscaper or an airport or whoever wants to run multiple different types of units and manage it through the same software system, they can. And I think you and I have talked about this before. I think that software was somewhat ahead of its time because, the need for that is when people are at mass scale with units and, a golf course who's got, 30 different types of robots. And we're seeing that used more in multiple different types of robots in different environments. Not to get us off track, but, think about an airfield, baggage control robots, mowing robots, striping robots, all of that, all in the same vicinity. That system is kind of made for that. But the last thing I'll say is, so Robin, Robin had a strong partnership and ownership interest from Husqvarna Group, and most of the product, I would say, 80% of the product or so that the landscapers were utilizing, Husqvarna was providing, and so all of those users primarily are working direct with Husqvarna to buy their equipment and support their equipment, and so Robin doesn't run an active marketplace anymore for buying that equipment. We support the software and some of the new pucks that would come out for tracking assets and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't necessarily get us off track. I mean, I think that it's interesting you bring up about it being ahead of its time. I mean, where I am right now, since we're brand agnostic and we're running so many different robots, it's definitely the point where, and I'm looking at one app and I've got a few hundred robots here, and, it's like I'm putting them all in different states,
Right.
actually, in order to keep them tracked. you can definitely start to see. And even when you and I had talked in the past, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. Now that I have a lot more robots, you can see the value, you know. But I do agree, it is hard sometimes for thought leaders like us because you come out with ideas and then people will go direct to one brand. They think they're better off that way. And it's more of like a you'll need us eventually, just
Right.
hold on. Like you'll
Yeah.
be there, you know. So that's an interesting take, and I couldn't agree with you more. So it yeah, so it must be nice now that you're with Graze because it had to be pretty easy to get the API shared. Because I know that's probably something that was frustrating for you
Yeah.
is sometimes to get the API to just help move the industry forward. Um, Being that the machine, so what is the Graze reporting to the Robin platform? Is it pretty similar to the stuff that all the other apps would report? I'm assuming.
Yeah, it is similar. One thing we're working on at Graze is the ability for third-party systems to not just be able to start and stop the unit, schedule the unit, change some basic settings, but really looking to allow the mapping and changes of the maps and zones and so forth to happen within these third-party systems. And we're doing this in part because of a unified command and control system that the airports use and adding this into their system, which allows us to open up the APIs there and then also open it up to the Robin system. So it will be more. In an ideal world, you wouldn't have to provision every robot to the individual manufacturer's app. You would be able to do it through a unified system, especially if you're really scaling this up and trying to do multiple different brands across multiple different customers.
So how do you guys, I always wonder with the airports. Airports has been something I've never got too into. I'm always a little bit concerned about the liability. Are you guys staying outside the runway areas or are you actually starting to get inside? And if so, and if you don't want to share this as proprietary, that's fine, but you share as much as you want. Um, what are you guys doing with that? And because I'm sure there's a lot of acreage outside the fence that needs to get mowed regardless.
There is. So, mowing outside the restricted areas is obviously fairly simple and more about just the partnership. In fact, I've heard of landscapers who have some of these contracts at airports that had been deploying, robotic units from other companies, and the airports didn't even know about it. And so, I think the use case there makes sense, especially in these wide open areas. We are starting to deploy on runway. So there's the Airfield Autonomy Initiative, which is a group of so you have the FAA, you have the National Center for Manufacturing Sciences, and then you have a couple grant entities that have gotten together to really create the guide point and the paperwork for what it looks like to automate the airfield, not just from mowing, but from perimeter security, baggage control, FOD detection. There's a number of things. So the good news is that there's this roadmap that started to get created, and we were selected as the mowing partner for this 2024 season with the FAA to really showcase how we can do mowing on the runway safely. And one of the key elements of it, if you map out a section of grass on a runway and you need to go to the next zone, and the unit, finishes that zone, it stops and it needs to cross over a runway to get to the next zone. It has to send a command to the tower to say, I'm looking to cross this runway. I'm at this position. The tower then needs to confirm, like they do with the truck when you're out on the runway. And then the mower would get an approval from the tower, and then it would cross, and then it would start mowing the next zone. That's probably the most difficult part, because like when I'm out on a runway, I've got a walkie-talkie and I'm communicating to the tower, telling them every move I'm going to make, making sure I don't, turn right when a plane's coming in. Robots actually will be more efficient at this than humans once we get the entire process well refined. So when all of this is happening today, there's people out on the runway. We're watching it. We have emergency stop buttons. The whole drill. But the studies have shown that most of the accidents on active runways are due to human mistakes. So it's due to a truck turning the wrong way, a lawn mowing crew crossing into the wrong area. And so the theory is that if you automate some of these key tasks, that robots are less likely to make a mistake with well-defined boundaries and commands. And so that's really the fun part of all of this as we move it forward. And the last thing I'll say is we're doing some work at Air Force bases. Air Force bases, obviously, a key element is don't wanting people in the secure areas, right? And so robots make a lot of sense, but the restrictions in terms of what the robot can collect in terms of data, when it can run is very restrictive. And so we're working through all of those changes to the unit for that use case.
Yeah, that's actually really fascinating, Logan. And actually, you know, obviously not focusing on that part myself, you would not have even thought about the robot asking for permission to cross. And I would expand and say, a robot will be as patient as air traffic tells them to be
Right.
versus a human being being like, I want to get done with my shift. So yeah, you can totally see why it would be better and it's more fuel efficient. So how do you deal with I always wonder then how you deal with like jet blast areas, stuff like that. I would assume your machines are, I mean, if you haven't seen the Graze product, anybody should go check it out online. But obviously a big, heavy piece of mowing equipment
Yeah.
versus some of the more lightweight stuff. So how does it fare in that type of situation?
Yeah, there's two things. I mean, you have to be at a certain weight to operate on the airfield, so it really has to be commercial grade equipment. We're around 1,200 pounds, our unit, and so it's unaffected. If you look at kind of the Echo or a Husqvarna Sierra, which are on the larger side, they're still too light to be out there. If you put a smaller, Husqvarna E-Post unit out there, the thing would be in the air somewhere.
Yeah,
So it is the kickback. I mean, having been out there multiple times as a plane lands, I mean, your hair is straight up in the air. I mean, it's an experience. You don't realize the kickback that those planes can give. But yeah, that's a big piece. The other piece is low profile. So the higher the unit, obviously, the more frontage it's going to have for wind to grab it. And so making the unit, designed correctly where that type of pressure can easily move off of the unit. And we have an advantage in that we're so low to the ground that we don't have as much of a problem. What typically does happen, though, is you get a lot of dust. And these units, whether they're using vision or LiDAR, will typically stop and wait for the dust to settle down because it's likely too dusty for it to feel safe enough to continue to move forward.
gotcha. Um, couldn't they kind of do, I mean, so I don't know if airfields are irrigated, but could they help with the dust with irrigating the turf, or is that something that you guys are probably
So
already
they're
working with?
Yeah, they're not irrigated, and there's parts of the airports that are irrigated, but not the runways. But they are doing a lot. So a lot of the dust is on the actual runway, and one of the robots that's active on these runways now is this FOD collection, so foreign object detection and debris. Getting that off the airway and getting the sweepers out there has made a huge difference. So they're doing a lot on that. And if DFW Airport was our first launch. It's pretty immaculate out there. I mean, it's surprising how well maintained these airports are, and the FAA is out there with a magnifying glass looking for cracks in the concrete. I mean, the standard for what the airports have to manage to is incredible.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of souls on those
Yeah, yeah.
tin cans going up and down. So that's good. I'm happy to hear it actually. So the are are you guys selling them or are you putting them in subscription? How do you guys go to market with them then?
Yeah, so our first production run, we did a robot as a service model. So all of those units are being sold. It's public knowledge, $5,000 per month per unit, so 60,000 a year. And the reason for that, and I actually have lots of thoughts on this, having been in the industry, and I had a dealership back in Ohio as part of Landmark. The robot as a service model is good for starting out. It allows people to get to market faster. It allows our enterprise level customers to stay under a threshold that typically doesn't require an RFP process. And so you can get units moving faster and it's less risky for the customer. long term, at least the customers we're working with have the capital to do a CapEx model and purchase the units outright and then pay a software fee for the autonomy. The reason this model really works well long term is the customer can put this on their balance sheet, and that's a huge benefit, and they're going to reduce their operating costs on their P&L. And so we see large corporations really wanting to show improvement in their EBITDA, which is done by capitalizing the equipment. So that's one benefit. And then to the companies, and I've always had this model is we want a cash flow too, right? I would love to run a cash flowing business. The stress of that is much less than running a tech startup. And so I am all for, if the model changes over time to a hybrid, and you still can offer the robot service, that we are all open to it. And so we're selling 150 units for the 2025 season. Those will all deliver around March. They'll be starting to be available in February. And all of those have the option to purchase it as a subscription and or a direct purchase.
Yeah. Yeah. See, and obviously this is something where I'm most passionate about. I think that the robotics as a service is the only thing that should be in the space, personally. I do agree with everything you're saying with all the CapEx and all the other stuff. The problem is, I don't know that these large corporations are prepared enough to actually have the right people maintaining them. And then if they try to call a dealer to just go fix it, the dealer is the person that gets the bad rap and deals with the BS.
Right.
The customer's upset with their robot. They have no reason to be upset. It just needs to be serviced or maintained. But once they get that cost that they didn't pre-plan for, now they're ticked off versus leaving it in OpEx. All you're doing is mowing per acre, which a lot of these municipalities and places are used to doing anyways. So I mean, for myself, as I sit here in my AOS garb, I am about ready to just stop selling robots completely, because the juice is just not worth the squeeze, for the consumer. And I mean, I think you said it best. I mean, if there's a hybrid someplace in the middle, I think that's where the industry will settle. I mean, if you and I are talking about being ahead of our times, this is what's going to happen. I think there's a lot of these other manufacturers that they're making a run. We all know people from manufacturers are coming like crazy from China. Everybody has to get out and develop some of their market share. But I think when all the dust settles, a lot of companies will realize just paying for a subscription service is the way to keep their robotics, the robots that are out running. Now, I don't know if, maybe the clientele you're selling to might be a little bit different. I don't know.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, at Robin, we felt the same way, that if it's not as a service, it just doesn't work. And I mean, Robin started in the residential market, had franchises, as you mentioned. And the only reason that those groups got to the scale of delivering a couple hundred units, and this was in 2017, 2018, I mean, it was still very new, was because they were offering as a service. And basically to the consumer was, oh, you're mowing my grass. I don't care if you do it with a robot or manually. Great that there's a cost savings. Great that it's quiet. Great that it's efficient. We're seeing that for sure on the commercial side. And one thing that we've started doing that I think makes a huge difference is a 24/7 remote monitoring of the units. So it's our team, it's our technicians who are watching any unit that's out in the field if it's running. And if an issue comes up, we can teleoperate into it. We can try to fix technical issues. We can see what's going on. And what that's giving us is this a training issue where we, technicians, whether it's our technicians or our partner technicians, is there an issue there? Or is it an issue with the machine? And really, we get to it before the customer. But to your point, I mean, RWE, where we have units, the airports, we have technicians who live out there, because I was deathly afraid of any unit not being with a Graze technician and us having our white gloves on and being able to, service everything. And so we've yet to deploy any units, and I'm not sure that we will next year either without our team. And that's costly. But you've seen, I can't tell you, we've probably both seen how many companies come to market and flop because their initial deployments suck. And, it's the easiest way to put a startup out of business.
Well, exactly. I mean, look, what you said, I mean, what you said is actually, I love it because I preach this all the time. It's why I actually have friction with some of the manufacturers because at least you guys are putting your technicians there and it is costing you money, but you're learning a lot.
Right.
So your curve is going to go up much quicker in developing a better machine because you'll actually just see and appreciate the things that need to happen. What happens in the space right now for the people that take brands that don't want to do that and don't want to leave somebody in the field, it turns into a she said situation where it's like, no, our robots don't have problems. And it's like, no, they do. And they don't fix them or develop them fast enough. So I applaud you guys that you're actually doing that. And Logan, a lot of times people ask, like, I mean, let's be honest. Technically, you and I are competitors, right? Why do I bring you on on the podcast? Because good competition is good to have. Anybody that's moving the space forward is good. My issue is when people want to always focus on this cost, like cost savings with
Yep.
robotics. And they're missing that they're missing the people are actually just looking for better quality, and I don't know why, and maybe we can talk about that next, is you know, I think that when you have salespeople that are only focused on selling based off of a bonus, they're always going to
Right.
take the easy thing. Cost. We're going to save you a lot of money, buy a lot of robots. The issue is when you sell that way, you're never going to be able to factor in the service to keep the robots running. You've sold them a bill of goods that they say, okay, this is what my cost is going to be. So it always interests me when companies actually realize there is a value to service, how quickly we grow. And is that one of the things with you being CEO at Graze? Are you leading that charge?
Yeah. I mean, listen, the first company I worked with when we got into this, I don't know, 8 years ago now was MTD, which is now Stanley Black and Decker, Robomo product. Very similar, service and deployment related issues that we came in and developed a model around to fix. Right, that was one of Robin's areas of service. We obviously partnered within Husqvarna, and I saw the issues there with dealerships and landscapers deploying these and so forth. And so on the on the service front at Graze, there's a couple things. One is, can we partner with companies and build these teams internally with Graze? So, for instance, with our solar customers, we are literally working with them on their hires. We are training them. They are living on the solar sites, and they're almost an employee of Graze, but an employee of our customer. We do offer a secondary model, which I really like. And while it's not a high margin business, you pay us a service price, and our technicians manage your entire system. You can still own the system for that benefit, but there's a monthly price for us to manage them. And we manage them remotely, but then we'll also send a technician out. And the idea is you don't touch it, just stay away from it. And I'll tell you, so Brain Corp, which produces autonomous scrubbing robots for Walmart and Target and so forth. Philadelphia was our CPO was their CPO for, I don't know, 15 years or so. And they did the exact same thing. They built technician networks in every major area where they deployed these scrubbing robots. And if a customer got in front of the unit, messed with it, they were the ones running to Walmart, fixing it and keeping it going. And it sucked for the first several years. But because of that, their contracts never got dropped. And the other piece to this, and as you know, as a manufacturer, all of that data is coming right to me. And our engineers can say, hey, Bob in the field has seen this and he's going to run this test and we need to make this bug fix, and it's fixed. Where our customer's just going to say, oh, it stopped, piece of crap. I don't know what the hell happened. And we don't get the data or the feedback we need. And so I think over the next 5 years, Graze will keep that model, and it will allow us to make the updates live, and we'll get the data we need, which is really critical to the company.
Yeah. Well, and as I hear, I mean, obviously I'm not going anywhere, you're not going anywhere. And I hear this and I'm like, okay, when I have a solar farm call, I should just call you guys and say, here, put them out. Is there something in it? Or would I want to own the machine? But you kind of get to the point where as this scales out, as we all scale, one of the things that I look at is I think we're doing driving ranges better than anybody right now, right? So I don't know that I want to take a lot of focus and say, do I want to learn solar?
Right.
So one of the things, and I want to see if you agree with this, one of the places I'm hoping the industry starts to go is instead of people taking the shotgun approach and just selling as much automation everywhere as they can, we start to look and say, who is the leader of this space? And then channel through those leaders because it'll actually move the space forward faster. That's my belief. I don't know what you feel on that.
Yeah, and this kind of relates into your thoughts on competition, which I echo. I think the market is so massive, and we're all trying to flip a market to be more automated. And it benefits every time you get a win and it's posted about and a golf course talks about it, it drives other golf courses. When Scythe raises a bunch of money and they release their new gen, that's positive, right? It's everyone sends me articles and they're like, oh my gosh, did you see this? And I was like, this is fantastic, right? I mean, the worst market to be in is if you're the only one doing it. And the question is, why are you the only one doing it?
Exactly. And how much money are you spending of your own to keep
Yeah.
doing it? Yes.
So
Yeah.
I love that. And I think from the deployments, yes, I think, the perfect examples is I get landscapers who are inbound interest into Graze. And I do these 30-minute calls. I try to do 5 a day with inbound potential customers. And I talk to the landscapers all the time. And I refer them out all the time to others in the market. So if they're doing residential and they really want a residential mower, it might be a Husqvarna, it might be a Crest, whoever it is. Greensy. I send a lot of landscapers to Greensy because I say if you want to be able to stand on a mower and run it manually, and then you want to be able to, run the perimeter and mow it autonomously, like Greensy is a great partner. CPQ is great. And that's where I think we need to get. And there's a healthy competition is great. In solar, we have a competitor, right here in Texas who is doing a great job. And we run into them at sites and it's great. And we've got one or two that are touching the airport market. And in fact, I was on a call with an airport in Ohio and they were like, would you be willing to deploy your units with XYZ company? And it's like, of course. I mean, part of it is I like the idea of competing side by side on an airfield, but
Yeah.
outside of that, it's like, yeah, why wouldn't we? And why are we? Same thing with the the golf space. Obviously, if we had a driving range reach out to us, we can't do driving ranges. We'd refer them to you, and
Yeah.
that's the type of thing that if we're all friendly and part of the industry, and I think as the industry gets built out, there needs to be a better collaborative approach to all of us coming together, sharing what's working, what's not, understanding we're competitors, and something like and then I'll stop this from a manufacturing perspective, the universal charger, the universal plug-in, I think that's great. Skype's doing it, and I applauded them for that. I was like, Grace should be doing this. Like, we all should be accepting that if we're selling to these groups that they don't want 10 different connections. So
Yeah.
why don't we all just agree to use the same universal charging connector? So
Yeah.
anyways.
No, and listen, I mean, you could go on for this. This is a show for Logan and Grace, but you know, I, I'm going to say it openly for any people that listen. I mean, I always look at it like, so I have two hats. I have Langton Group and I have AOS, and AOS has become very focused on the service, especially on driving ranges. But when I think of Skype and I think of Graze and all these things, I mean, at the end of the day, I am CEO of a landscape company. I just want to
Right.
know what'll mow most efficiently for my landscaping customers. Now, when I started, of course, I started with Husqvarna. You started with Husqvarna. As time is going on, though, and the technology evolves, we any leader of any company needs to look and say, what do I know and what works best for my portfolio
Right.
of mowing, right? And it's not a one size fits all. I mean, and I want to urge everybody listening to realize that I don't see in the next 5 years, I'm sure you would say, and I think you'll agree with this actually. No one, there's really not any one brand that does it great. I mean, I love Echo. They're probably my favorite brand I work with, hands down. But they have big mowers, and they can't, I have some limitations. 20 feet, anything under 20 feet, it's too tight. So I have to use different machines. So, when you're working, if you were to work with Langton, okay, what would you say? What's the ideal space for a Graze machine to mow, size wise, and then where would you say this is where the other brands might be better for those properties?
Yeah. So obviously, we today are pretty disciplined in airport and solar work. If you kind of dissect that, a kind of a minimum site for us is 75 acres. If we get a well, I should preface that. So the unit is going to do 75 to 125 acres a week. And
Okay.
ideally, one unit is mowing 15 to 20 acres per day. And so, what we don't want to have happen is the unit is being put into a 5 acre property, then a 5 acre property, and it's just not efficient for the unit. And so, the larger the property, the better for us. We love 100 acre sites where the mower can live on site, right? And so it mows all week, and then the next week it mows all week. And so, our average solar field is about 1,000 acres. And so you think about that, that's about 10 units. If you're mowing every other week, you can get down to 5 units, so that's our sweet spot. I will say the other area, which we've not done a ton of work in, is the parks and rec and municipality areas. We do have a big partnership with City of Plano here in Dallas, primarily because our headquarters is here. But we've been doing some work on that front, and I'm really excited about how well the machine does in a public environment. So the engineers spend so much time on the safety side that that's one advantage for us, that we're really able to operate in those markets. But yeah, it's really size based, and in terms of barriers. So like I don't get concerned about a lot of trees. Our obstacle detection and avoidance is remarkable. Our connectivity, even under very wooded areas, has been phenomenal. So I feel really good about that. And because we work on solar sites, we're used to these really remote areas with connectivity issues. As you go down the pipeline, it's interesting because so my alma mater in Cleveland, reached out, heavily involved, and they wanted a unit for their front lawn. And it's big. It's probably 12, 13 acres. And I was like, the Graze is not the right fit, but I'll get you a Husqvarna unit. And here's why. I think it stripes well. I think the Sierra looks good, does well, open air. Like I was like, this makes sense. And so I make recommendations all the time for folks of where I think a different style unit in Echo would be a fit. I'm not super familiar with Crest and some of the newer brands because I've been out of it for a year, but was even quite impressed with Nexmo on the drop mow and go system, and I've seen some of their stuff, and the striping's been amazing. And so I am excited, and I think you can relate to this. 4 years ago, I was one product. Like people were sending us samples of things, and it was like, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And now I've got a little list of like I can refer you to a good 6-7 players that have products that I could say work.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited, and you're right. And I mean, we're doing all of them, and a lot of them are very similar. They all have their unique, crest. Obviously, you have a tower, you don't have to set one up, but they're trying to get their tower coverage right now.
Right.
Nexmo obviously uses TopCon, but so there's a lot more robust tower coverage for them. Um, and down the list. I mean, the nice thing with Echo now is, set up one of their Wisnat setups and you're good for 5 miles. So one of them runs 5 miles, you're done. So yeah, I mean, it's exciting. I mean, I think the most exciting thing for me is that since everything has gone to pattern and the random days are probably coming to an end, the customers actually see it as the technology is here now, right? I think that was the biggest thing that was stalling it in the beginning, where people just referred to it just like your Roomba in your house. Unfortunately, I think too many people had bad experiences with their Roomba getting stuck on a towel or something they left laying in their living room. Now I think that things are coming out with vision, and even the machines that just have sonar that can have some obstacle avoidance. It makes the acceptance of the technology much greater. Um, and I mean, I'm sure like you, I mean, the calls are coming in, hiring technicians, and there's a lot of people. I think most importantly, Logan, there's a lot of people that are excited to be in the space. Because
Right.
the other thing, everybody's always talking about the equipment, but once the adoption curve starts to hit, you got to have people to support it and grow the space. And I think that's what's most exciting for me. I'm sure you agree as the leader yourself to know that I'm going to be able to lead teams in the next decade or, multiple decades in this space.
Yeah, no,
So,
that's absolutely right. It is, I mean, from engineers to technicians, the space is finally exciting. If you thought about graduating university 7 years ago and going and working for a lawn and garden company who had some early stage robotics, it was hard to get folks interested in that. But you're right, it's become a really big space, and I'm also excited. I have to say, I'm very excited that the U.S. companies who have historically been in this space are starting to get more involved in automation, start thinking about those future iterations. Because one thing that you and have seen this is every company trying to solve a North America problem is not in North America, and I think
yes,
so much of
yes.
what a golf course and our parks and rec and our consumer homes is so different than European, especially different than China, and the R&D, if it's not being done in the U.S., is a big mistake. Like I get pressure from our product team that the R&D needs to be out the front door. Like they don't even want to travel to parks because they want to be there all the time. So it is that I think has always been a big deal. And I think the reason you're seeing companies like Graze and Scythe and Greensey start to get some momentum is because we've all grew up around what the use case is. And we lived it. A lot of us ran companies that did that. And so it's natural for us to tell the product team, that just doesn't work. Like that's not how you mow grass. That timing doesn't work. The runtime doesn't work. And I think that's why you see startups competing quite well against incumbents because of where the R&D is being done and where the focus is. But just my 2 cents.
No, I mean, I agree totally. And I mean, I'll expand that thought. Uh, for too long, the R&D was getting done on the backs of the service providers and the
Right.
dealers with no compensation. And unfortunately, I think it's why some of them are ceasing to exist. And it's really been a shame. Right? That's the one thing in our space that I think one day we'll all look back. There's a few of us that could probably write a book on the space eventually. And the reality of it is, there's a lot of people that have invested a lot of time and money to give feedback, and they're never thanked for it. It's it's thankless. The only benefit to the people that are still existing is they were actually doing it as a service. And I mean, I'm fine saying it myself. So at least we were making money on the service part of the mowing.
Right.
But there was nothing to be made to help some of the manufacturers. But it is great to see now. I think they're starting to learn and say, yes, we have to test here and we have to realize North America has different turf types and different grow zones. And I mean, Logan, and I should ask if you guys have this. You might not need it because of your obstacle and your sensing, but I can't tell you how long I've told manufacturers they have to put not a rain sensor, a flood sensor on a robot. I have been begging for it for years, and it still is not done. Um, and it's hard for me as a guy that says, "Hey, I'm just a service provider. I'm never going to make a robot, so no one has to be scared. I'm going to start a company making my own robot." But it's a simple ad. I mean, you could literally, I'll say it so anybody can hear. You could take the rain sensor that sits on the top, put it in the bumper down low, and if it drives in a puddle, it says, "Oh, there's something there," and it would just turn around and park. It is the easiest hack to change,
Yep.
and no one's done it. I've asked for it for years. So
It's so it's a great use case, and we, because our sites are remote, and um we're focused on a leave behind unit on solar and so forth. It makes a lot of sense for us. We don't have it today. One thing we are implementing, crazy enough, is a fire sensor. So when you think about large scale commercial mowers in remote environments that get dry, a spark can start a wildfire. And so the reality is like, we were talking about this in Virginia recently at some of our sites. It's remote. If it starts a fire, we need to know. I mean, all the units have a fire extinguisher and everything on it. But we got to get, people out there fast when that happens. So I think it's a very similar style problem. And these sensors, it's easy to install this. So I'll challenge our product team to be the first one to do it. We'll write a white paper for you on it.
great. And I just look at it and it's like, I never mind saying these things and just giving the suggestions because it's just going to make it's better for everybody, you know. To not have a flooded robot, so Logan, we've pretty much took the whole hour talking about stuff. I didn't really take the time to talk about your background and your family. We've already done that before on a podcast.
Of course.
But is there anything that you want to add about stuff that you have coming out with Graze, or do you think this kind of caught people up to the things that you're working on, and kind of gives the recap on where you are
Yeah.
today?
No, I think it's great, and I always love being on. And I think the industry has evolved so much, and I think it's I run into people all the time who are asking questions about, okay, what's next and where do I go? And I do think that education around autonomy is so important from every level, from enterprise all the way through to consumer. I mean, and so if we can, if we can work together on these things and do this, I have a friend who created Service Autopilot, who has a Lawn Care Millionaire, and he's launching a new series to talk about the pain points of running a landscaping company and labor. And so I think there's a lot of very cool opportunities there. So yeah, let's stay in touch and figure out ways to continue to work together.
Yeah, tell your friend. So you said it's what's he have, a podcast doing it, or what's he doing with that?
So he's launching a new one. So I'll connect you both because I think that'd be a
Yeah,
great
tell him.
opportunity.
Have
Yeah.
me on the show. It'd be nice to be on the other side of it, from
Yeah.
this. So,
It's
yeah.
yeah, very cool.
All right. Well, Logan, I want to thank you again for being on the show. I know you're a busy
Of course.
guy, but I think it's always fun to talk to somebody that's kind of in the trenches together. I think we're both dealing with the same things a lot of times, so it's good to have you on.
Perfect. Yeah, great seeing you, Joe, and look forward to being on again.